Hey, it's Blister Guy. I'm leaving the house and I'm walking to work, and that should give me enough time for an episode of Concede.
Greetings.
Hello.
Greet.
My greeting.
Well met.
I greet you.
Greetings, traveler.
Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 150 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making you... Nope, we're going to start over. Welcome to episode 150 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. I am your host, RidiculousHat. I am clearly a little rusty here. I'm joining you from Gadgetzan, New York. Our friend Appa is, you may have noticed we're recording on an off night, so he is stuck at work, but we found a friend. But before we get to that, let's talk about our friend that's here every week. From Karazhan, California, it's Botticus.
You should have left it. So many of the podcasts I've been listening to this week, everybody's just been messing up the speech. The intros, the transitions, everything. I think it's fine.
Maybe.
I would have left it.
Yeah, well.
How's it going, Hat?
It's going alright. I think the entire Blizzard universe is pretty sleep deprived from a week of boomsdaying and puzzle labbing and Battle for Azerothing and everything else. And
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm definitely have lots of sleep every night.
Yeah. And joining us laughing at the clearly sarcastic statement that Bottica shared with us, our guest, you may know him from our previous episodes as our coach extraordinaire. It's Nickolias from Ironforge, Ontario. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back again this year.
Yeah, welcome
Second
back.
Podcast this month as well. So
yeah, you were on Valence last week, right?
Yeah, last week. So
well, it seems
getting
that
it all in.
with these new cards, we just have so much to talk about, and there's a lot to talk about. But first, I want to talk about how Concede is supported in large part by you, the listener. If you'd like to find out how you can support us and receive rewards in return, head to patreon.com/CoinConcede. Big thanks to our new patron, Electric Mick. Thank you, Electric. Is that the first name? I guess so. It's fine. How are we doing on ladder? Nickolias, I'm saving you for last. Botticus, how's it been going?
So, I'm really glad we have Nickolias on this week because this last week was the least that I've played ladder, I think, ever since I got back into Hearthstone by a very large margin. I played so little that I did not even finish my Brawliseum that I started out 3-0. But I played a couple more games of it, got to 6-2, and then, of course, on Monday, I log in and realized that I never finished it. But yeah, I played a bit of Puzzle Lab today just to get a feel for it, and that looks like it's... we'll talk about it later in the news, but looking forward to things calming down in the other universe I've been playing in so that I can get some more games in on Hearthstone. Because I think I want to make a push for at least a top 500 this month, but we'll kind of see where I end up. I think I'm in the 2Ks after not having played for about a week and a half.
Jeez, it's a long time to take off, man.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I played a bit, kind of. I guess I hit Legend right when Boomsday got released, a day or two after it, and then kind of just stopped for a little bit. But I don't know. It is what it is. It was a very busy last week. This week will be less busy.
Yeah, it's true. That the first week of the game which shall not be named, I suppose, under a new expansion, can be pretty intense. For me, I think I wasn't Legend when we recorded last week, but I made it over I think like right after last week's cast. I was playing Zach O's from Vicious Syndicate. I played his Odd Warrior. No, wait, last week? Did I talk about this last week? I feel like I did. I don't remember.
We did so many podcasts last week, it's so hard to keep track.
Yeah, it's
and there's been so much in between then and now that it's kind of like,
it's been
where
6 days, and I
are
feel
we?
like
What
it's
are we
been a
doing?
month. Yeah, it's so I don't remember if I said this or not last week. I hit Legend with Tank Up Warrior, with Azalina Soul Thief, and then I kept playing some more on ladder with Zach O's list from Vicious Syndicate, and he has double Super Collider, and boy was I wrong about that card. Boy was I wrong about that card. I wasn't sure on it, but then someone explained it to me and said, "Listen, Super Collider punishes your opponent for playing 2 minions. Tank Up punishes your opponent for playing 1 minion. Brawl punishes your opponent for playing multiple minions, as does Reckless Ori. You're kind of countering any board state they have." I was like, okay, I kind of get it. And then I played Super Collider, and I hit one Mountain Giant, and it hit another Mountain Giant. I'm like, I like this card. This card's good. So,
that was one of the cards when we were reviewing that I didn't want. I don't think I thought very highly of it, but I said that the effect was significantly more powerful than it looked, but I was worried about how it would pan out in games because you can kind of play around it if you have taunts. But it turns out if your opponent doesn't play a lot of taunts, or their taunts are not very efficient at doing anything with it, then that card can do a lot of work, like hitting Mountain Giants into other Mountain Giants. And the first one, it's really hard to play around, especially if people aren't used to seeing that in lists.
yeah, I actually even enjoy just hitting an Annoyatron into the Inventor. That was a perfectly reasonable use of clearing 2 really irritating cards. And you just get to leave it on board, and anytime your opponent plays 2 minions, they have to be just so careful about how they present their threats. And I also have been incredibly impressed by Dino-Matic. I really didn't think Dino-Matic would be quite as impactful as it has been. It's really good before Dr. Boom, because you can usually set up a board state where it clears stuff. After Dr. Boom, it is nuts, because it deals the 5 damage and then rushes in for 3 wherever you want. It's really, really good at controlling a medium-sized board, and because you play a good amount of mechs, you can really direct where that damage goes. So, I've been enjoying that a lot. I had an 8-win Tavern Brawl with it. I coached Matt Jans, one of our patrons, with it, and he went into a 12-win Tavern Brawl with it, and it's really, really powerful unless you're playing against Quest Rogue or Deathstalker Rexar. Nickolias, talk to us.
So my first off, the Brawliseum. I decided to see if Taunt Druid was actually a deck. It is, except I forgot to put Master O card in my Taunt Druid, so I didn't do as great as I should have.
That's a good
Card
card.
seems important.
You want to play
That
that.
one seems like a good one.
Yeah, go figure, right?
Unless you're playing Floop, and even if you are playing Floop, it's probably still a good one.
Yeah, no, I don't have Floop in my list. I don't think I need it. But it was working out for me without O card, so I put O card in it after and took it to the ladder and have done pretty well with it, I'd say. Just this month in general has been pretty amazing for me. I made a tweet the other day, like, this will be my 10th, right? This night will be my 10th consecutive night finishing in the top 100. And right now I'm ranked 51. So it's been pretty incredible this past this month. Yeah.
I mean, you've just been showing a lot of improvement every month. You can see the progress from just where you were even just a couple months ago, where you were just kind of starting to break in. I felt like you were just starting to break into the top 200 every once in a while, and then you finish in the top 200, and now you're just always in the double digits. It's pretty awesome to see. I'm pretty jealous, if I'm going to be honest, but if I can't be that jealous because I'm not putting in the same amount of work that you are. So it really goes to show that you're putting in good work.
Yeah, it was 2 months ago that it was not the first time I finished top 200, but the first time I finished top 200 in a point season. And then last month was the first time I hit top 100. And now I've just been pretty much living there. So it's been, I don't think I've hit my peak, and that's kind of just keeps driving me forward. So yeah.
Well, if anybody's looking for somebody to coach them, and really wants to get maximum amount of improvement, I definitely think sounds like you would be a great choice. Not gonna lie.
The only thing I have to say is,
By the holy light!
Wow, gold and legendary! We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
and this, our kind listeners, is one of the people that has graciously signed on to the Coin Concede team to help people get better at the game. And Nickolias has actually helped me get better at the game a few times by beating me senseless and then me stealing his plans from the other side of the table. So you don't have to go through that process. He'll even sit on your side of the table if you ask nicely. Yeah, it's really impressive, man. 51. It's every single time I look at my friends list here, just hovering near the top there, and I think it goes to show that you can do it with multiple decks, and especially in a meta that is so much of a bubble. Because you were talking before the show about what you see in the Legend meta versus what you see elsewhere. I mean, what have you run into that's been different in the top 100?
Oh my god, there's so many hunters and quest rogues, and it's really frustrating because I don't like to play those decks. I like to play the decks that lose to those decks. So I've still managed to have a pretty good win rate because those are like pretty much the only two decks that I lose to, and then everything else I tend to beat. It's just first, like I don't like playing against Death Rattle Hunter. I don't like playing against Quest Rogue, and they're everywhere up there.
Yeah, well, in Death Rattle Hunter, I think the last numbers I saw, it was one of the most popular decks in the game right now, if not the most popular. It's been kind of amazing how 6 weeks ago it was nowhere. A month ago it was just starting to be seen, and now it's almost consensus a top ladder deck, and thanks to the addition of Spider Bomb. Spider Bomb really changed a lot for that deck, and obviously Giggling Inventor, which just I have a feeling will, in its current form, not make it through this expansion.
Yeah, both Giggling Inventor being a card you can play in the deck, as well as a card people are playing in other decks. Just the stat line in terms of defensive stats are amazing, but Death Rattle Hunter just needs a bit of time to really set up all of their stuff. So I could see how Giggling Inventor only putting 4 power on the board for 5 mana, barring, of course, branching paths or buff spells. But there's not a whole, other than Malagos Druid, there's not a whole lot of that going on. And against Malagos Druid, you're probably already ahead on board. So chances are the branching paths are not necessarily going to, or they're not going to be able to get off of branching paths to get on in some damage. So just the fact that the meta is slow enough because of Giggling Inventor allows a deck like Death Rattle Hunter to kind of set up all of these board states where they're able to make really good use out of their Death Rattle cards and give control decks a really hard time and not lose immediately to the aggressive decks.
Yeah. Well, and I've got some pretty crazy stats about Giggling Inventor and a card that is particularly known for being good against it in the tournament section. But for now, why don't we talk about the news?
So a bit of a light news week if we're looking in terms of the competitive side of the game, but for those of you who enjoy a little bit of time away from the high competitive thing or high competitive side of the game, we have the Puzzle Lab is now available. So if you haven't logged in, make sure you log in. You get 3 free packs just for logging in now that it's available, and it's a cool little new way to do solo content. So essentially what it is they have 4 different labs, quote unquote, where each one you run through a sequence of enemies that have different requirements in order to beat them. So the first lab, they have lethal puzzles, which is obviously the most kind of obvious version of this type of mode where you're just trying to figure out how to deal lethal damage to your opponent. You have Mirror, which is a very odd concept, but actually pretty cool. Essentially, you need to make your board state look identical to your opponent's board state via trading and healing and a bunch of different methods for for essentially copying their board exactly. And then there is board clear, where you have to remove all minions from the board, including your own. So you have to kill all your opponent's minions as well as your own minions. And then the last one is survival, which I've only played through the first round, but as far as I can tell, what it is as soon as you heal, you need to heal yourself to full life because your opponent's hero power is going to deal 29 damage to you exactly. So if you heal to full, then essentially your opponent's hero power does 29 damage to you and you win that round. The puzzles are grouped in sets of 8 or 9, which I didn't really understand this when I was going through it today, why they had it grouped like that, but I watched this video that we have linked in the show notes where Giovanni Scarpati and Max Ma went over why they did what they did with Puzzle Labs, and it's actually really ingenious that they wanted everything kind of grouped together so that you wouldn't finish a lethal puzzle and then have to go out and then click the next puzzle and then go back in and do it over 100 times, because they have 100 different puzzles in the Puzzle Lab. So they have them grouped in sets of 8 or 9, which they kind of guesstimated is about how long a play session would last. And it's great because you don't have to finish all of them. As soon as you finish a puzzle, it's completed, and then you can move on to a different lab or continue on, or a whole host of different things. So I really like how they did this. I have finished all of the lethal puzzles and done one each of the other ones. It feels like a lot of fun. I'm prematurely disappointed in the sense that there's not a whole lot of replayability to this, but in the same way, I'm not that disappointed because I don't want too many things in the game where I feel like it's all, trying to get my attention when really all I want to do is ladder. So I'm going to be excited to go through this when I have time, finish all of the puzzles, and it just seems like a lot of fun. Hat, I know you've done a small amount. I know you've been pretty busy today, but what's your first impression so far of it?
So, small amount, I want to make sure I'm clear. I've done 2. I did Lethal number 1, and I appreciate that the most important thing that Blizzard could teach a player the first time they open this is Cold Blood Ghostface. I really appreciate that. And yes, that is a spoiler for the first puzzle. I feel confident you'll all get there. But it's not just a puzzle, it's a way of life. Cold-blooded Ghostface. That's what you do.
You are right.
But also, I actually really liked this video with Giovanni and Max. First of all, they're continuing showcasing new people in the Hearthstone development team that we haven't met yet. They may have been working on this game the whole time. I'm guessing they have been. And Giovanni was the one that was on the video talking about the Monster Hunt. He is very clearly in charge of the single-player content, and they talked a lot about the interface. I remember doing the Frozen Throne single player, and the Hunter one in particular, which was 2 damage for every minion in your deck. So the deck that was recommended to me on day 1, on hour 1, was, I believe it's Barnes and Ragnaros and some other, I forget exactly what, I think it was Barnes Yasharaj, then you need the Yasharaj to pull the other Yasharaj, and then you need to go get Ragnaros. Something like that. I don't remember exactly how it works. I remember it being really frustrating, and the entire game was about high rolling on turn 4 and then restarting if you didn't get there. And I remember 3 or 4 clicks to restart every single time for, I think, 30 minutes on just Hunter. And now they took a little button where end turn is, because you don't need to end your turn, and they just made it start over. It's a revelation in efficiency in a mode that they expect people to make mistakes on, because you're right that there's low replayability, but I don't know about you, I haven't gone back and done any Lich King. I haven't gone back and done any Monster Hunts or dungeon runs unless I have a quest. They're fun, but Hearthstone and single-player content is still very much completionist-based. You get it done and then you don't play it anymore. They had visions of it being replayable. It is replayable in some contexts. If I'm on the train and I'm really not sure about my connection, I might start up a dungeon run, but even then, I'll probably just start up a casual game or a wild game or something I don't care about. It's because it's the train, Botticus. Don't make that face at me.
Pat said he played a game in casual. That makes me happy.
It's because I was worried that I was going to disconnect, so I just removed all the stakes from it. Still wouldn't be happy if I disconnected, but at least it's not costing me anything. Anyway, that's not what's important here. Stop distracting me. The point here is they really go in depth on how they optimize the user experience, both as part of the game mechanics and also how you interact with them. In grouping the puzzles in groups of 8 or 9 because they expect you to play a few of them in a row and you don't want to go back to the menu every time, in putting the reset button right on there, and in making these UI choices. When you click the reset button, one of the scientists will scan the field and reset it. Another one, it's the biology scientist. All the green stuff comes out and grows over. It's the UI and the experience matters a lot. And I really think they did a better job with this particular single-player content than they've done with anything before in that aspect.
Yep, I totally agree. I really just love how they really thought about how people were going to be interacting with this mode and made it perfectly to make it enjoyable. Nickolias, do you have any thoughts so far on Puzzle Lab? Have you had the opportunity to do any of it yet? Are you going to be doing this?
Yeah, as soon as I got home from work, I jumped in. I finished Lethal, including the Boom boss, and then I also finished Mirror and that Boom boss as well. So I'm about halfway done.
Okay,
So
cool.
I'll probably
Did you have trouble with any of them?
The first,
I don't want to give any spoilers, but
yeah, the first one on each of the Boom bosses, so the first Lethal and the first Mirror, I had to tap out for, but I've been able to solve everything else by myself. So it's been a lot of fun. I want to get it done as soon as possible because I'm not going to be able to go back to ladder with this still like needing to be completed. So I'm going to try and finish it up.
There was one in Lethal that I wasn't sure how to do it, and then I looked on Twitter. I saw a meaty tweet about it, and I read a comment or two that didn't spoil how it was done, but essentially just confirmed to me that it could be done. And then I remembered a special trick that is not obvious, and I don't necessarily like that they included that trick in here, but
You have to talk to me
it's
about it after
acceptable.
because I've done them. I just don't know which one you're referring to.
Yeah, well, we can talk about it later, but either way, go do Puzzle Labs. It's a good time. And so the next news highlight we have on here is the season 2 pro team standings have been finalized, and Tempo Storm ends up passing Fade to Karma, which, I mean, seems pretty unbelievable to me, just how much of a lead Fade to Karma had and just how killer a lot of their players are. But they were able to Tempo Storm was able to get there, take first place, and $7,500 per player to them for season 2. And as well as that, Hunter Ace is the first official 1-star master. So pretty impressive. I'm hoping that Hunter Ace is able to continue on and get up to 3-star master, but considering how little time we have left, I know there's a few points that are not quite in there yet. It's kind of an awkward system, but it'd be cool to see. Hopefully, somebody can get 3-star master, because that's kind of crazy. Nickolias, I know you've been pushing some pretty high legend finishes. Are we looking to, if you can continue on to this, are you looking to try to shoot for prelims?
We'll see how it goes this month. If I have a good finish this month and I stick around the top 100, then I think that's 9 points. So I have 3 more months, and then I'm also attending DreamHack Montreal next month. So if I can finish top 8 there, which, granted is pretty unlikely, but if I can, then that'd be another chunk of points. So it's possible for me to. It's obviously something I'm going to try for, but I don't think it's unexpected result. It's having to be at this level for like at least 3 months is a lot to ask.
Yeah, it's it can be stressful, especially because after you get the first one, then the other ones become so much more stressful. But at least if you get the finish in the first month, you have one of the months is you can kind of throw out. So I think you can do it personally. So I'll be rooting for you on the last day of the month.
Well, thank you.
You have any comments on pro team standings there, Hat, or you want to go on to this lovely next question I have?
So, I just want to say, well, I think we only have one more tour stop this season, right? We only have DreamHack in a week and a half. So I don't see any other on the schedule.
Atlanta's in November.
Is that? But that's not. Is that season 3? I guess it is season 3.
Should be. Yeah.
It's not on the website.
The only
though.
season that's not there or that's out of the season would be December.
Okay. Yeah, it's not listed on the tour stop website now.
I don't know if it's before the cutoff, but yeah, I haven't looked into it that much, but I know that Atlanta's in November and I'm going, so.
Yeah, well, that's good. I hope it's still there and that you don't just show up at an empty hall. But also, Fade to Karma at the end of July had 196 points and Tempo Storm had 190. And now, 3 weeks later, Fade to Karma still has 196 and Tempo Storm has 210. It's pretty crazy that they were just able to leapfrog a team so powerfully. But when you look at who's on Tempo Storm, Amnesiac's been doing really, really well. Muzzy and Just Sayin. Now, Just Sayin hasn't put up a ton of results, but Muzzy
He's put
and
up a lot of top 8s, right?
he's put
At
up,
least a few.
in the season 1, yes. In season 1, he definitely had a few of them, and I remember a couple of the high roll players there. But I don't remember seeing any in the past few months. But Muzzy and Amnesiac have been high performing as expected, and they both hit the elimination rounds. Well, when we talk about it in tournament standings, you'll know.
Yeah, the reason why there was such a huge jump and why F2K stayed stagnant is because they already had their 3 ladder finishes, but Amnesiac actually did not have a 3rd ladder finish. So I remember talking to Glazer, and he said that Amnesiac would have to miss top 25 in the last month because I don't know if he missed a finish or just didn't play for the first month of this season, but that's how they got so many points and F2K stayed stagnant.
Yeah, I mean, he can take a month off and still be in the #1 team. Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's Amnesiac.
So the last thing I had on here was a kind of an op-ed piece that I thought the question of the title of the article was at least very interesting and something we could talk about. And is a combo meta good for the game? And the writer was admittedly slightly biased, but I think it's at least a worthy question to discuss. I know had a lot of opinions on it, so I think I'm gonna get some throw in my 2 cents where appropriate. But what's your opinion on kind of this question, Hat?
You're starting with me? You're really starting with me?
Yeah, I don't know really where to go because I don't think that any of us think that it's necessarily a combo meta. I was looking at the HS replay stats before the cast, and if you look at all ranks, the top decks are Odd Rogue, Odd Paladin, Even Shaman, Zoo Warlock. But if you filter by only Legend, it completely reverses, and you have Quest Rogue, Token Druid, and Death Rattle Hunter all at the top. So it's just a huge kind of reversal there. And obviously this article was written a little while ago. You know, he was talking about Mech Cthulhu, and yeah, we don't really see that as being part of the meta. But you look at Quest Rogue, Token Druid, Death Rattle Hunter, you could consider these almost combo decks. They're not OTK decks like the article kind of talks about, but they are decks with very difficult to interact with game plans for the most part. Well, maybe not Token Druid, but well, are you saying Quest Rogue is you're able to interact with Quest Rogue other than killing them?
Quest Rogue wasn't the one I was referring to, but
Death Rattle Hunter. I mean, a lot of times they just go egg into, or they can just egg play dead in the same turn, followed up with. I mean, it's not a traditional combo deck, but these are more difficult to deal with threats than, say, a general mid-range deck. I would say I wouldn't consider Death Rattle Hunter a mid-range deck or a control deck necessarily. Do you feel differently, Nickolias?
I just have a hesitation about calling Death Rattle Hunter a combo deck because maybe my version or my definition of combo is more not centered around that, but it's fine. It's fine.
Maybe
I want to hear what.
heavily synergistic deck.
Yeah. It's a synergy deck isn't necessarily a combo deck, but anyway, I want to hear what Hat has to say. It sounds like a good.
I have feelings. I have so many feelings. Okay. First of all, before I say anything, telling a person or responding to an article by saying your feelings are wrong is never the way to go. And I want to make sure I'm going to poke some holes in the logic in this article. I'm going to disagree with some suppositions here. But I think something I've learned over time is that if someone has an emotional reaction to something, there's a reason for it. Now, the reason may not always be the fault of the game. The reason may not be something that holds up under logic, under scrutiny, but the reaction comes from somewhere. And a trend that I've learned is that the more I see a deck complained about on Twitter, especially by people that engaged with the game more casually, even if I say, well, you can beat Quest Rogue, you just have to go face, back in the Ungoro meta, where the deck had a 47% win rate, where I can tell anyone you can beat Quest Rogue, all you have to do is go face, and then even if Quest Rogue just gets the quest out on turn 5, before either of the nerfs, it still is something that players who don't engage with the game the same way we do are frustrated by. And after the first Quest Rogue nerf in the Ungoro meta, which was more powerful, I saw a lot of people complaining about Exodia Quest Mage. It's not because the deck is too good, it's because the mechanism that it wins on feels to a player with less competitive engagement with the game that it is unbeatable. It feels like it operates in a way they don't understand, and then they just suddenly die and there is nothing they could do. So when there are strategies that make players with less competitive engagement with the game feel as though they have no agency, there's at least something to look at from a design standpoint, from a perspective and perception standpoint of where is this coming from. Now, I do believe that Quest Rogue needed at least one nerf, if not two. I do believe that Quest Mage did not. But there were complaints about both, and I think that when we look at what happened the first few days of the Boomsday meta, there was concern. Dog tweeted about it, right? He said the entire meta seems to be aggro and then OTK decks, and the first couple days it was very combo heavy. The first game I played in this meta was Death by Mecha Cthulhu. But we're not there anymore. And drawing judgments and making conclusions too quickly is a very, very common mistake that people make with any new meta. Because the first day of every expansion, Zoo is good. And the first week of every expansion, greedy decks seem really strong. I think the current contender for a deck that seems good and is going to fall away is Death Rattle Rogue. I think that deck is nowhere near good enough. I think it will go away soon, but I think it was good enough in the greedy meta that people were playing in the very beginning. We saw a lot more Togwaggle Druids. We saw a lot more... There were various other weirdo combo decks, and, Zoo came out on top in the first few days because it preyed on the greed. It was already a streamlined strategy, and it was very effective at just being innately powerful with little modification from a strategy that existed before. But when we look at the conclusions made in this article, when the sentence, I think it's safe to say that Mechathune has been the standout card from the Boomsday Project is said, I think it's really hard to agree with the conclusions made here, and the author specifically says they don't enjoy combo decks. Now, if someone doesn't like combo decks, and there are combo decks in the meta, I cannot say you have to like it, right? Hearthstone as a game, you enjoy it on your terms, or you play it on its terms if you want to compete. Now, if you want to compete, and you don't like the meta, and you choose to continue to play, that is your choice. But if you want to win, you play the way Hearthstone tells you to win right now. If you want to play the way you want to play, you can, but there might be ways that's good, there might be ways that's bad. In this particular meta, there are some slower decks that struggle against control, or struggle against combo. Now, there are also decks that struggle against control, and for Odd Warrior to be as good as it is, I think that you probably can find ways to play control. For a meta that is claimed the aggro options are not particularly good, Odd Rogue and Zoo Warlock are still very popular. Tempo Mage is somewhat popular. There's lots of options here. And I think this meta is very balanced. And in order to have that balance, here's the most important thing. You have to have combo. You have to have combo to have balance. Because otherwise, with no way to go over the top, you end up having super greedy control decks because everyone has to win through the board. And then you end up with decks that just play big stat for stat minions. Just to compete with the greedy control decks, and everyone just tries to go bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's not really an end to that cycle. Firebat famously said this in a rant that he had in 2015 when talking about the secret Paladin meta after the Grim Patron nerf. And what he says was, the only way to compete right now is to play the best stat for stat minion on curve you can. And in Druid, you can't play Mysterious Challenger, so you play Fel Reaver. And the only way to beat these decks is with options that Blizzard keeps taking out of the game. Because Patron ruined these decks. And you could beat Patron with other options. Now, Patron was too strong, but having combo to compete with these mid-range strategies was necessary, because otherwise it just became a turn-by-turn arms race. And the combo decks we have right now, Malygos is not really even a combo deck. It's a mid-range deck with a burst finish. And Shutterwalk is not even all that great right now. Togwaggle takes forever. There's Quest Rogue, I think, is the deck that we are most worried about, but that's just because Giggling Inventor is way too good, and that deck takes great advantage of it. But without combo in the meta, to balance out the other archetypes, you end up losing a lot of options because decks get pushed out of the meta by other decks that have no reasonable counters. And I think the meta we have right now is consistently changing, consistently shifting, and extremely healthy, extremely diverse, and allows players a lot of options, a lot of room to play well and perform well when they play well.
I think I would amend what you are saying to say that anti-control decks should be a part of the meta, and I think that's probably what Nickolias was getting at when I called Death Rattle Hunter a combo deck, which I can see now that it's not necessarily a combo deck, it's an anti-control deck, whereas a lot of combo decks fall into the category of anti-control decks because obviously they end the game in ways that are not very easy to interact with for the most part. So I guess that's would be a better way to describe the Death Rattle Hunter as an anti-control deck, and I think most of the decks up at the top there, when you look at the legend ranks, are anti-control decks. And one of the biggest problems with the anti-control decks is just that anti-control is generally supposed to lose to aggro decks, but Giggling Inventor is so powerful that it gives you enough of a percentage against the against the aggro decks that you have a good enough win percentage where you already beat the control decks and you have a good win rate against the aggro decks, means that these anti-control decks might be a little too strong. So a lot of what Hat said makes sense as always, and I guess we'll kind of see what ends up happening. It sounds like the easiest way to make a change in this would involve changing Giggling Inventor, but we'll see kind of where Team 5's heads at when it comes to nerfing time. Do you have any more thoughts about this discussion, Nickolias?
Yeah, Top of Legend is pretty much all aggro and anti-control decks. Pure combo decks aren't very common. I'm not sure if you would label... I guess it depends on your definition of combo. I don't know if you would label Quest Rogue as combo or anti-control or both. But yeah, it's aggro's still very strong, so it's definitely not a combo meta. So I have no worries about that. I don't think that a combo to the title, is a combo meta healthy or is a combo meta good? I don't think so, but we're not there, and I don't think we've really ever been there. So I'm not very concerned about it. The thing about combo is that they pretty much always just lose to aggro and mid-range decks, so it's very hard for combo to be the dominant strategy and have multiple decks that are combo based. It would pretty much have to be a super control meta, and if you refer to the end of Witchwood as a control meta, the only real combo deck was Shudderwalk, and yes, that was a very strong deck, but I wouldn't say it was a combo meta. So
if you want to see what a combo meta really looks like, by the way, just go to your deck selection screen and go to that corner icon and change it from standard to wild. You will find a combo meta. If you want to see what it looks like, when you see the card Juicy Psych Melon being played on 4, and you just get this feeling of dread because you know what's going to happen to you in 3 turns, that's what a combo meta feels like. And I'm deeply concerned about the health of wild. But standard is not that. Standard does not have a card that says 4 mana draw your game-winning combo that you can play in 3 turns. Yeah, and I was doing a coaching session, and we played Starliner Druid, and we killed someone on turn 5. By playing 10 mana's worth of stuff, and then dealing 28 damage to the head on turn 5. It was not okay.
That's gross.
It was not okay.
So gross.
Yeah, so
that's disgusting.
If you want to see what a combo meta looks like, tab on over there, give it a shot, especially above rank 5. There are ways to win that are not combo druid decks, but boy did it seem really strong, and boy did we play against a lot of druids. The only other deck we lost to was the Mech Warper and Metaltooth Leaper Mech Hunter deck, which also kills extremely quickly. A lot of Goblin Bombs, and then all of a sudden, all those Goblin Bombs get really big and really angry really fast, and then you clear them, and then you die because they Leper Gnome you.
That sounds amazing.
That actually sounds pretty fun.
It's a really fun deck, and it hit rank 1 Legend earlier, but just to confirm, from what I'm looking at Vicious Syndicate's Gold app, and their top decks right now, the top 5, which you can actually get from the basic app, Odd Warrior is the highest win rate deck in the game right now, in Standard. Followed by Big Spell Mage, Cube Hunter, Odd Paladin, and Control Warlock is number 5. So, I think that we're in a pretty interesting time to be playing Standard, and I would strongly recommend giving almost anything a shot in Standard right now because there's so many options, and I don't know if we'll see a meta this diverse for quite some time. I'm actually worried that Giggling Inventor is making it more diverse, because a lot of these slower decks, I don't know if they could exist without that kind of presence in the mid-game.
Yeah, I wonder how heavily the control decks are leaning on Giggling. But does Odd Warrior even play it?
Oh, yes.
It doesn't, right?
Oh, of course you
does?
do. Yeah.
Yep.
And then those mechs gain Rush after turn 7.
Alright, fair enough.
The deck that I've been playing doesn't run it, but I'm playing Taunt Druid.
Yeah, well, you also don't play Spreading Plague, other notable powerful card, but you O-cart people.
I do, and then they die.
Do you O-cart people?
Well, yes, eventually.
Do you now O-cart people?
On ladder, I O-cart people. It's
Okay,
that Brawlicium that I wasn't doing that.
Okay. O-carting people seems good.
Yeah.
Anyway, Hat, why don't we move into the tournament section?
Oh boy, they've heard me talk, so they're going to hear me talk some more. Sounds good.
It's the grand tournament.
Alright, so it was called Copa America the past few years, but it's now HCT Buenos Aires. That was the tournament this past weekend. It was a star-studded top 8. Star-studded top 16, really. It was a qualifier tournament. Players had been qualifying for the past 2 months or so. And a person named Lee, who I actually haven't heard of before, won the tournament. That's L-I-I, Lee. I don't know him from previous events. But he beat Monsanto. Muzzy and Cosmo were 3rd and 4th. Team America, Malza, Kuonet, and Race were top 8. I should point out that's not a team of Americans. That is a person named Team America. And the top 16 had quite a few notable names. Chiansu, PNC, Topo Pablo, Amnesiac, Swids, Perna, Lucas, and Fun, GGGG. There were a lot of really, really strong players here. And you remember the meta from HCT Germany last week? Well, that was a formative meta, and the extra week of testing has made a pretty big difference. We're now seeing Druid. Well, Druid is still pretty Mally-based. There were 9 Mally Druids, but 4 big, 1 taunt, 1 token. There were 8 Egg Hunters, one of which did not even have Katharina or any recruit mechanics, and 5 Spell Hunters. 7 Even Warlocks, 3 Zoos, 2 Controls, a big drop in the Zoo presence. 9 Odd Rogues, 3 Death Rattles, and 2 Miracle Rogues. We've got 2 Odd Warriors and 2 Control Warriors. They all play Dr. Boom. 3 Paladins, an Odd, an Even, and a Mid-Range. This is the only class that has both an Odd and an Even deck at the same tournament, which I love. If you put them together, you get a full deck. You've got 2 Shutterwalk Shamans, 2 Mind Blast Priests, and a single Alaneth Mage. And I think Mage is probably the class struggling the most in this expansion. Maybe Priest, but Mind Blast can perform well at tournaments with the help of a ban. Mage kind of struggles in a pretty wide array of matchups, so it hasn't been all that popular. It's had a little bit of performance in the ladder, but not as much as we'd like. The winning lineup was Mally Druid, Egg Hunter, Control Warlock, and Odd Warrior. So kind of half control, half anti-control. And the second place was Mally Druid, Miracle Rogue, with elephants. There were 2 elephants in the Miracle Rogue. Even Warlock, and Dead Man's Hand Control Warrior. Well, 1 Dead Man's Hand, not 2. It's not the Bring It On kind of cycle through my deck, but it is Control Warrior with the intention of fatiguing out the opponent. Now, the stats that I think are crazy here. Lich King, we are used to being the most popular legendary in the format. It's a neutral, it's big, it's a control, it's value game ender. There were 25 decks that played Lich King in the top 16 out of 64. There were 18 decks in the top 64 that were playing Mossy Horror. And there were 36 decks with Giggling Inventor. 36. More than half of the decks that made the elimination rounds were playing Giggling Inventor. No other cards in the entire format were played in 15 or more decks. But Giggling is so good that Mossy Horror has instantly become the most popular epic in the game. And for a long time, it was Skulkengeist or Gluttonous Ooze or Doomsayer. Not even close. What do you guys think about these numbers? Talk to me.
36. Holy.
Isn't that nuts?
That is so many. That's more than Quarter Creeper, right? Like a lot more.
I actually am curious about that. I'm curious about Corridor Creeper and Bone Mare.
Pre-nerf, obviously.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I mean, Bone Mare was highly played, but not nearly that much. But I know Corridor Creeper was really high because you played it in basically all decks that played a lot of creatures, and even some of the decks that didn't play creatures. But 36 that's so bonkers.
Yeah,
I thought that card was going to be good. I did not think it was going to be that good.
Nah, and I do think that it allows slower strategies to exist, but any card that is seeing play in that volume, there's some kind of issue there that will need external intervention. It's just a little bit too efficient. So, I'm not saying that I think the meta is being distorted in a negative way because of it. It just seems like simply a costing error that I expect them to address, just because there shouldn't be any card that works for every strategy so effectively. So, there are actually a bunch of games that I'd recommend watching. The one that I'm going to describe here is the last game of the entire tournament. I will say, if you can find the time to watch Lee versus Amnesiac Game 1, I think that game was super cool and is worth your time. But the game we're going to describe is the last game of the tournament, Lee versus Monsanto Game 5. Now, if you look at the lineups, both Lee and Monsanto were very much about beating control, right? Like we were talking about the anti-control decks. Mally Druid and Egg Hunter are very, very good at beating control. Control Warlock is actually one of the better anti-combo and anti-control decks out there. You have Gul'dan and Demonic Project and Rin, all of which are very, very good at beating slower strategies. Whereas Monsanto was playing Miracle Rogue, which is a dead giveaway that he wants to beat control, and even Warlock's pretty good at playing fast Mountain Giants and smacking the opponent in the face with them, along with a Dead Man's Hand strategy, also pretty strong against anyone trying to take you to fatigue. So this final game was Even Warlock versus Control Warlock. Now, generally, the Even Warlock has to be the aggressor here. They have to go fast, because if the Control Warlock gets to set up shop with a bunch of Void Lords, it's usually able to slow the game down enough to get its control tools online and fatigue the opponent with Rin. So, this is a 30-minute game, and Even Warlock is fast. Control Warlock's designed to slow things down. Lee played Librarian on 1 did not attack on turn 2, which makes a lot of sense, because you don't want Hooked Reaver to get online any faster. The matchup is just about attrition. Now, there's an interesting choice on turn 6. Caster, we're talking about it. It's turn 6. Monsanto has a Twilight Drake in play, and Lee has his Rin. And Monsanto has, in his hand, Shroom Brewer, Spirit Bomb, and Spellbreaker. And the play he chooses to make is attack, Spirit Bomb, and heal up my Drake. Does not Spellbreaker the Rin. The casters were talking about and saying, well, in this matchup, the Even Warlock is tapping so aggressively and needs to win before Rin gets online that it's the right thing to do to just ignore the seals. What do you all think?
I would agree. I don't think that if the Control Warlock is winning with the seals, then they're probably winning anyway. So developing the board and getting more stuff out and saving the silence for either a taunt or something else seems to make more sense, like a Void Lord.
Yeah, it seems really important to be able to silence a Void Lord if you ever have a hope of winning the game. And as we said before we knew that Rin was a playable card, it's really slow. And if the Control Warlock is spending their time playing seals, then and you're not able to push an advantage and win from there, then you probably weren't winning the game anyway. So I don't think I don't see a big need to if anything, you'd rather them start playing their seals because it gives you a chance to pressure them because they're spending so much mana on such small threats.
Yeah, if I'm the Even Warlock and my opponent is playing 5 mana 2/2s and 5 mana 3/3s, I'm generally happy with that, as you know, assuming I can go face and hit them with some Giants or Lich King or something.
Yeah, and I like that conclusion in general. Now, the problem here is that Monsanto's hand did not have any Giants. His first threat was Twilight Drake, and the Shroom Brewer was his second. And a couple 4-attack threats is nice, but not really what you're looking for against Control Warlock. So Godfrey comes down in a couple turns, clears the board completely, takes out a Skulking Geist, takes out the Shroom Brewer, and takes out the Twilight Drake, thanks to an attack from a Skulking Geist on Lee's side. And Godfrey clearing the board on turn 7 is not great, especially when he follows up in a couple turns when Lee plays Seal number 1, Doomsayer, Play to Beetle. And you look at the life totals, the Doomsayer doesn't go off, right? Mossy Horror comes down and clears the whole board. But Lee is at 29, and Monsanto has been tapping so much, he's at 7. So what happens here is that on turn 10, Lee says, wait a minute, if I play 5 mana 3/3 and 5 mana 4/4, you have to trade. Because if I have a removal spell, I kill you. So he plays Double Seal. Monsanto trades. He plays Double Seal again. Monsanto trades. And Azari is about to come down and kill, in Monsanto's deck, the Lich King and Blood Reaver Gul'dan. So Monsanto says, well, I have 1 Demonic Project in my deck. And I don't know how many minions you have, but I have to play this right now. And he doesn't know Lee has 5 minions in hand. 2 Stonehills, Gluttonous Ooze, there's one other one, I forget what it was, not important, and the Azari. And Azari becomes Blood Imp, which is not great. And so next turn, Lee says, okay, Stonehill, Rin, go, and plays a second one. Let's start over. Let's do this again. Now, the important part of this is not that Azari got shut down, it's that it didn't matter that Azari got shut down. Because Lee is still at a very high life total, Monsanto's had to play defensively the whole time, neither player has Gul'dan, and Lee is 4 cards higher in his deck, Monsanto is 4 cards lower in fatigue. So, Monsanto is playing threat or 2 at a time, and Lee's hand has double Hellfire, double Spellstone, and Twisting Nether, and a Void Lord. Along with, well, a bunch of seals. And Gul'dan ends up being card 29 for Monsanto, and card 25 for Lee. Lee plays his first, gets back a bunch of crappy demons. A 3/3, a 4/4, a 5/5, and a 6/6, doesn't matter. And then, as soon as Monsanto plays his, Twisting Nether comes down, clears the board. Monsanto barely stays alive, against the attack from Lee with Death Coils, but when you're 4 cards behind in Fatigue and behind on life, it's just not going to work out. And Lee managed to take the game in spectacular fashion, despite the unlikely universe where he completes Azari at above 20 life, followed by the unlikely universe where it gets turned into a 1-mana 0/1, followed by the additional unlikely universe of let's do that again. Very fun to watch. Really enjoyed it. And this upcoming weekend, we don't have any tour stops on the schedule. The global games are ongoing. The first night is tonight. There's going to be 3 days of that, so we'll definitely talk about those next week. Mask82 on Twitter already has talked about a game that we need to feature next week, so thank you very much for that tip. We will 100% be talking about it. And any other fun tournaments that happen this week, we will be reporting them to you. Anything to add, gentlemen?
Nope. Gul'dan bottom 2, rip.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, what Bot said.
Yeah, it turns out Gul'dan is really good. So that does it for the tournament section. Now our friend Nickolias actually has some... There's a really good subject to talk about, because there was this Twitter thread about hand tracking and hand reading being discussed by the pros, and a bunch of people asked us to talk about it. You know what? How about top 51 legend player, Nickolias?
Yeah, so this explanation this week, we're going to be talking about hand tracking and whether you should be doing it or not, and some other terms that I just need to throw out. So there's a bit of clarification, because sometimes people get confused between them all. But to start it off, I can't remember who. Do you know who the first tweet was from? You mentioned to me earlier. And
It's linked in here. It's by Sippywee, I believe. Yeah, Sippywee. The original tweet is, am I the only one that thinks that hand tracking should not be a part of Hearthstone? Just make it so the played cards are played from a random position in hand. I feel so dumb when I sit during Mulligan and stare at my opponent's hand to see what he keeps. Also during the game, by the way.
So that's an opinion that I can get behind, but what followed was a tweet response by Meaty, who the TLDR is he said that hand tracking is a waste of brain power, and instead assume your opponent has the best possible cards if you're winning and the worst possible cards if you're losing. Orange responded and saying that was the dumbest thing he's heard in a while, and so here we are, because there was a lot of people who saw that thread in our Discord and wanted us to talk about it. So just for the terminology, just so there's no confusion, hand tracking is just keeping track of the cards in your opponent's hand, notably how long they've been there, have they mulliganed them, what position they're in. So just keep that in mind. Game planning is essentially how you win your matchup and how you achieve those goals. So that's pretty basic stuff. Like if you're, I'm going to be using Odd Rogue a lot in this example, but if you're Odd Rogue, you want to play a 1-drop on turn 1, and preferably Hench Clan Thug on 3. Other game plans can be a little bit harder to, or aren't as basic. Like you need to have bait some removal and play a particular card and get that card to stick. But basically, it's your ideal game plan. And then hand reading is basically the combination of those two. That's why I like to think about it. It's predicting or getting a read of what cards your opponent has based off the information you've gathered from hand tracking and understanding what their game plan is. So again, going back to the Odd Rogue, if they go 1-drop on turn 1 and dagger on turn 2, and then on turn 3 they go dagger 1-drop again, and then, some garbage stuff on turn 4, you can probably make the read that their hand is filled with 5-drops. They don't have anything good to play on turn. They don't have any good 3-drops, and 1-drops obviously aren't that impactful. So they probably have at least one Giggling Inventor and a Vile Spine Slayer. So by reading that, you can play around that by, instead of playing a Mountain Giant or something, you can play 2 or 3 smaller minions and try and counter that. All right, so that's just some basic terminology, because I know people sometimes get confused about that. And in general, my opinion of this is that meaty is correct when it comes to ladder. In ladder, you're playing so many games in a row, you're facing different people all the time, or hopefully. I had a moment about that last week. Anyway, wasting brain power when essentially using a deck tracker like HS Deck Tracker, which essentially does the hand tracking for you, there's no reason not to do that. And then you just understand what their game plan is, what kind of cards they have in their deck, and hand reading becomes a lot simpler. Doesn't require as much brain power, and you can consistently play at a high level for a longer amount of time. When it comes to tournaments, however, I think that it's completely off base because you don't have access to a deck tracker. Unfortunately, those are banned in tournaments, and again, that's something that I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. So hand tracking gives you valuable information that you can use to hand read. And when you have a read on what their hand is, you can more optimally choose what play you want to go for. Sorry. So for an example, going again to the odd rogue, if you've been able to keep track that they threw away the leftmost card in their mulligan and they got a new card back, and they haven't played it the entire game, and it's turn 8, it's probably Leroy. So instead of doing a greedy play or saying, hey, he probably doesn't have Leroy, and doing something that leaves you dead to it, by knowing how long that card's been in the hand and knowing how they mulligan, you can more accurately assess that, hey, it probably is Leroy, and make sure that you don't die to it. Yeah, so I think that when it comes to ladder, it is a waste of brain power because you have a tool that will essentially do it for you. But when it comes to tournaments, I'll take all the help I can get. So, Bot?
All right, so I think that for 99.9% of Hearthstone players, hand tracking is either going to be done by Deck Tracker, which I strongly recommend, or I think that it is mostly a waste of your time. So in the sense that I think that the majority of Hearthstone players, outside of the people playing at the very, very high legend ladder ranks, and if you're playing at the high legend ladder ranks, you probably should be using Deck Tracker anyway. But either way, I think that the majority of people are really still learning Hearthstone, and hand tracking is probably my lowest priority on that list. I think that hand reading, on the other hand, or just reading game states and knowing matchups and knowing how games play out and how to correctly navigate a game state, is going to generate you way more percentage points than trying to determine exactly when a card went into their hand and which card is which. If they give you a signaling thing like pointing a card somewhere, I think you can kind of keep track of that stuff is useful, but that's because you have a lot more information about what that card potentially is. Yeah, so I saw Orange and Amnesiac talk about hand tracking as a skill, and I see a lot of people saying that it is a skill to track their hand, and I'm having trouble kind of parsing what exactly you mean by that as a skill, because it doesn't seem very skillful to me to just write down the card went in here. This card is a gifted card from Primordial Glyph. This is this. This is that. In my opinion, that doesn't take a lot of skill. Doing it quickly, now we're starting to talk, because I mean, being able to do it quickly in a way that allows you to process everything, have more time to be able to process your hand reads, that makes a lot more sense to me. But in terms of just writing down exactly which card is which, that's not making a lot of sense to me as a skill. I think the whole package is very skillful, but maybe you guys can convince me the other way, because I'm not fully convinced that I'm correct on that. It just, to me, it seems like the hand tracking is something I could do with a piece of paper, but even though I can sometimes play at high legend, obviously I'm using a deck tracker, but I think it's more beneficial to me to be thinking about the game state, thinking about how they're playing out their cards, and determining my best course of action from there.
So just two things. The first is that the reason why I wanted to go over the definitions at the start is because I think some people are getting it confused, which is, some people in the Twitter thread might be referring to hand reading instead of hand tracking, and just kind of using those two interchangeably, which could be causing some confusion. But I do disagree that hand tracking is not a skill, because, just because at tournaments you don't have a deck tracker and you're generally not allowed to be writing things down. You have no external help.
Most tournaments let you write things down.
When I went to, I think it was
most of the HCT tournaments, at least recently. I know Oakland didn't let us, but that was out of the norm according to most of the pros that were there. The majority of the stream matches I see Amnesiac play, he's writing stuff down, but that might be different.
When I went to EGLX, we weren't allowed to take notes either. So that was HCT Toronto. So I don't know if it's like by the like case by case, but I'm pretty sure like the playoffs and the qualifiers and stuff, you're not allowed to have any of that.
Yeah, when you get into, I guess, the memorizing aspect of it, then I think it becomes it's starting to sway me a lot more in the sense that it's a skill, because it takes a lot more mental effort to be able to do that. But I also think that for the vast majority of players outside of these top pros, I think that focusing too much on that ends up losing you percentage points, versus you be able to gain a lot more by focusing on the game state and how the game is played out, and knowing your matchups. I think that for the majority of people that's the case, but obviously for these top pros, for people who want to be trying to win every tournament, I think that hand tracking is a skill that is definitely worth working on and perfecting, as people like Amnesiac have done.
Yeah, okay. So I think that's totally fair, because we're not, when you're coming to just entering a game for the average player, just understanding what your deck does, understanding what your game plan is and what your opponent's game plan is, will get you a lot more points, a lot more percentage points in your favor than hand tracking. When we're talking about the people who are a high legend, like these people, Meaty and Amnesiac and Orange they already know all the matchups. They know whatever game plan is. They know when they get into a game with the deck that they've selected to bring to a tournament or to ladder, what they want to be doing in that game, and they know based off what they see their opponent doing, what they want to be doing. So that part is already solved for them. So they have to dedicate any time to that. Like when I queue up a game as Zoo against Odd Rogue, I know exactly what I need to be able to do to win that matchup. So I don't have to worry about that, and I can start keeping track instead of what cards are in their hand, how long they've been there. Again, this is mostly something that HS Replay or HS Deck Tracker does for me, but if I don't have that available, I can dedicate more of my energy to tracking their hand, which gives me the read of what they might have. So I do agree, most people, this is not a super important skill to have, but the fact that it was a professional, like Media is a pretty top player and who thinks that this skill is useless, and I disagree with.
I mean, he's a top ladder player, right?
Yeah.
Hat would know this better than I would, but I haven't seen a lot of great tournament results from him lately. I don't know how much of that has to do with him not participating in tournaments, because I know he's kind of a doctor and stuff now.
Yeah,
but I mean, I'm assuming he plays with deck trackers, so
yeah,
the whole tracking aspect is kind of out the window for him for the most part.
Yeah, so I don't know what his tournament experience is, but anyone who spends a lot of time in tournaments, this should be a skill that you work on because it is free information. And all you have to, you're already supposed to be concentrating as much as possible on the game because, you know, you're at a tournament and it's pretty important that you perform well. So it's just, you should already be in that mindset, and it should just be something that you can, just another thing that you have to add on to the list. Yes, it's mentally taxing and it sucks to do, but if it's free information, I'm going to take it.
Okay. So I agree with both of you at the same time and neither of you at the same time, because obviously that's my jam. So first of all, it is very important to present context. The debate that we have witnessed to on Twitter is between a bunch of people that consistently finish top 50 ladder every month. We are talking about the very, very top of the game. And what we are doing right now in this discussion is armchair quarterbacking, which is the comparison I'm going to make is to American football. That there are discussions on sports networks, on podcasts, on in anywhere where people watch football. And we are saying, this is the problem with Andrew Luck's technique. If Derek Carr only threw this way, he would be so much better. But you know what they're doing? While they're making these technical execution missteps, they are also getting tackled by multiple 100-pound men at the same time and making decisions in 3 seconds after a lifetime of physical training, also with natural athleticism. So the reason that these players that we're talking about are in this position is because they have the natural ability to be pros. And I believe there is a level of natural ability required in an esport just as much as a regular sport. And some people have said hand tracking is a waste of mental energy, it doesn't have to be done. But Mitsuhide on this thread said something I really, really like. Removing any aspect of Hearthstone that requires effort or skill would be dangerous at this point. We gotta get our edges where we can. Not everyone is meant to be a top pro at anything. In fact, very few people are. It's a small, small percentage of the player base. And this is both a skill and an ability. More an ability than anything. In order to even be in the position to have this discussion, you have to be able to commit all these pieces of information to memory while parsing other information and game planning and theoretical and percentages and sequencing and technical execution simultaneously. That's supposed to be hard if they're going to pay you to play a game. That's supposed to be hard, and it is. And then if you have the ability, you have to polish the skill of learning that and executing it. So, if there are people that have that ability, if there are people in this position and they have access to the skill, 100% they should do it. It is the smallest edge I think you can gain, but it is still an edge. And if you are a player listening to this and you are not a top 50 Legend Ladder player regularly, and Nickolias is top 51, I want to point that out. But he's still really good. But still, even at that level, this is probably not the thing to focus on. But it is a thing that you can focus on. And when you are looking for small edges, and when you are playing the game full-time and professionally, and you have the ability to do this, I'd rather that Blizzard leaves it in the game, because there's some discussion on this thread about there should be a shuffle option, cards should be placed randomly. Meaty, in his particular comment of assume the opponent has the best possible cards or assume the opponent doesn't have the best possible cards, it's probably about as good about 80 or 90% of the time, but that's not 100%. And if he doesn't track, and his opponent does track, and his opponent beats him because of it, that's an edge. It's an advantage. If you were listening to this, you probably shouldn't hand track as the first thing to do. If you were playing on ladder, why would you bother unless you were specifically training to be a top tournament player? And if you are, go ahead and try it. It's worth doing if you want to play at the highest level and you are able to do so. But it's really, really hard to get there. There are other better ways to improve your game, though this way to do it is still relevant, assuming all the other pieces are in place. Does that make sense?
What a surprise. Hat summarized everything beautifully and spoke words really good.
Funny that.
Yeah, I mean, that's I don't know how to say it better than that. I think that, well, what I'm worried about with a discussion like this is, which I think we've done a good job of avoiding, is putting an emphasis on something. I feel like other podcasts have talked about hand tracking before and made it seem like an important part of the game, but it's important to a point for only so many people. And really, I just think that I want people to get better at the game, and I think if you want to get better at the game, then hand tracking is not the first place you should look to improve your game for the vast majority of people. So look into it if you're interested, but really I would really only look into it if you're looking, as Hat said, to be a top level tournament player performer. And if you're looking to do that and you're looking for stuff to start with, I mean, lineup prep is something that I have done very little of, and if I'm going to start doing a lot of tournaments, if I felt like I was going to start doing a lot of that, then that's somewhere I would want to focus first, way before I start looking into manual hand tracking and even mental hand tracking, which it seems like a lot of the tournaments are doing.
Yeah, and there are some metas where it's more important than others. I think the first Ungoro meta in particular, even before the mulligan, looking at the left card in your opponent's hand was so important because of the quest meta, right? Because Quest Rogue, Quest Warrior were both very popular decks, and knowing beforehand if your opponent was playing that was really important. And then the kind of sub-meta came up of clicking the left card a bunch of times just so your opponent saw it turn red. And then there was the kind of sub-meta after that of don't even touch the left card in your hand, even if you're not playing Quest Rogue, just so your opponent thinks it's Quest Rogue. But also, that was the meta where Mimic Pod first came around. And knowing where the left Mimic card pod was so important, because then you could know what the right one was. When you Mimic Pod, you draw a card, a copy goes immediately to the right. If the player is playing correctly, they pod, and the left card from pod, if that's played, it doesn't say anything underneath, but it is the same as the card on the right. That is really clear information, and I don't agree with Nickolias that it's free information. I believe it's given information. Small but significant term, because it is free if you don't count the energy you are spending mentally keeping track of it. And, you know, semantics, I know, but free implies no cost, and there is a cost to this for almost everybody in terms of what you're able to pay attention to in the game. Almost all of us are way more limited than Amnesiac and Orange are at keeping track of stuff in Hearthstone. Those guys are really, really good. And, you know, it's hard for people to admit there is an ability ceiling here that a lot of people are hitting. You look at the Trollden video when APM Priest first came out, and you watch everybody that's not Dog try and play it and screw it up like 4 times. And then you watch Dog play it, and Dog, I think, is one of the most naturally talented players in the entire game. One of the most naturally talented players I've ever seen, because you watch him day one, and he invents meta-defining decks and plays them perfectly in 15-second turns really, really often. I can't think of anyone else that has that kind of ability to dial in on what matters so quickly and execute it so well, so quickly. But he's a full-time streamer and really good at it and makes a lot of money. He plays in tournaments. When he does generally well. I think that if he didn't play in tournaments at all and was full-time, or didn't stream at all and was full-time tournament grinder, he'd probably be one of the best that this game has ever seen, just based on raw talent. Because you look at him play APM Priest, the guy has 75 seconds to attack through 4 Annoyatrons, and figures it out nearly flawlessly. That should matter. And even though it excludes a lot of people from competing at the highest level of the game should be hard to reach for some and impossible for others, because exclusivity drives the competitive scene. You have to compete to be good, but you have to be good enough to begin with. Not everyone plays pro football or pro baseball. Not everyone can run 425 40-yard dash. They're not supposed to. Not everyone's going to be a football player. Everybody else watches. And I'm fine watching football. I'm not a football player. And I'm not a Hearthstone pro either. So I am fine watching the pros of the game and seeing what they can do and will do that I can't do. It's fun.
I have thoughts about that.
Go ahead.
This isn't. So I don't believe that there is a. I don't think that any person can't compete. It may take them more time. It may take them more energy or effort than they're willing to put in. But I sucked at this game for a very long time. You know, I'm sure a lot of people sucked at this game for a long time, and they put in the time and effort to get better. You know, I'm not at the top level, and I probably won't be, but I also have a full-time job. I can't spend, and I also just don't want to play Hearthstone that much. If I quit my job and I wanted to play Hearthstone for 12 hours a day, then I could probably get to that level. I don't think that, you know, Dog is very good at deck building, and that's a whole another skill, and learning how to, like, the APM Priest display that he put on was just amazing. But I don't think that, you know, football is limited by your physical ability. You know, playing a game like League of Legends, how fast you can click and how quickly you can make decisions and how well you can communicate with your team are limiting factors. With Hearthstone, there's not as much of a limiting. It's not to say that it doesn't take skill to play Hearthstone, because of course it does. It's just, I feel like that skill is more accessible to people. I don't know if I explained that right, but I don't think that you can just say, you will never be Dog. It's like, you will never be Dog if you continue to play as you are right now. If you put in like 12-hour days for several months at a time and spend all your time with coaches and reviewing, you can get to a high enough level to compete in tournaments. Whereas, I'm going to take another example, StarCraft. If you are physically unable to click your mouse as fast as, I don't even know what some of the APMs were, but a super high level, you could not play that game at a pro level. So,
but memory is a limiting factor, and mental limits and physical limits are only different in what you see versus what you can think. I agree that Hearthstone as a game is more accessible because it's less mechanical, right? And mechanics are inherently limiting. But memory is an ability that is natural, right? It is the sort of thing that you do not choose how good your memory is. You can train it. You can make it better than it is. But there's a really big difference between practicing and coaching and learning and discussing and building up a skill and having natural talent and ability. I'm not talking about how Killing All Day spent years, literally years, saying, I want to be a pro-level Hearthstone player, and spent years practicing and prepping, and he got there. And he's a great example of hard work, and he's a talented player, makes good reads, understands the matchups, makes decisions on the fly, understands what matters. But I'm talking about the player that goes into a new meta and within the first 10 hours has figured out Quest Rogue. I'm talking about a player that goes into a new meta and before the first 24 hours are up has figured out the exact build of a deck, that the person that figured out Q-Block in the first week. These sort of things they're the players with the innate ability that are going to start naturally predisposed towards success, and then there are players that are going to catch up through work ethic and understanding and just a different skill set. And not saying that the players with the natural ability are always going to come out on top, just they are usually going to do a better job with less information up front and do a better job in newer situations with less information, because just their brains work a little better for the stuff that matters in Hearthstone. And everybody's different. Everybody has different abilities and skills and talents. But memory that we're talking about here and hand tracking is measured and trained, but at some level is innate, is something that you either have when you're born or don't. And there's ways to make that a little better, but there's not really ways to change how your brain was made. And in this particular case, some people have this natural ability for keen memory with little effort in a photographic way that others just won't be able to replicate even with all the training in the world. I don't mean to tell anyone that's listening, you will never be a Hearthstone pro because you don't have a photographic memory. Please don't take that out of this. Just that these are mental athletes the same way they're physical athletes. Part of it is, the largest part of this is practice. The most important thing is practice and learning what matters and practicing and practicing and practicing until you get it at an innate level. But there is a luck factor in what skill set and what talents and abilities you have naturally. And that does matter, even though Hearthstone as a game rewards people that work hard enough that it doesn't matter enough that you shouldn't try. It just is a factor that we have to acknowledge, the same way that not everyone's going to be a track and field star, not everyone's going to be a football player, not everyone's going to be a Hearthstone pro or a StarCraft pro. And Hearthstone might be the easiest of the ones that we just listed to access. But there's still going to be a point where if you have these natural abilities, it's going to come easier to you.
And also, we still do have a turn timer, so the length of time you have to make decisions with Hearthstone is longer than most other games, especially the ones we've mentioned, like League of Legends and StarCraft, where you're making these decisions very quickly. So it seems like Hearthstone, you have unlimited. It almost feels like unlimited time because you have so much more time to make your decisions. But that is a limiting fact. The turn timer is a limiting factor. You only have so much time in a turn to make a decision, and that is limiting maybe for a smaller portion of the audience than other games, but still is a limiting factor.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you said.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hard subject to talk about, right? Because really, discussing limits in a game that's so rewarding of practice, and in a game where people think they're often worse than they are, is a disheartening subject. And we don't want anyone to get the message, we're telling you that you can't, because that's not the case. But we're also we're breathing rarefied air here, and one of the beautiful things about Twitter is that we get to kind of peer into what we don't normally get to see, the discussions among people that literally get paid to play Hearthstone. That is their full-time job, that it's something that all three of us here, as much as we'd love Hearthstone to be our full-time jobs, in some weeks we act like it is. We have other responsibilities that just take a larger priority in our lives. And, you know, I Dog figured out Quest Rogue on day one. He also streamed 12 hours that day. I don't stream 12 hours in a month. So there is a payoff there for that time commitment, and practice matters more than anything. But when we're talking about also on top of that, keeping track of cards in the opponent's hand at the same time, there's a very, very small group of people that can do both of those at the same time, and you'll usually see them playing in tournaments. They're called Hunter Ace. We'll call them Hunter Aces as a term. These players, the perfect conflux of practice and ability together, kind of give us the show when we're watching HCT, and those are the players that make the game fun to watch, because in many ways they can figure out things that we wouldn't be able to in the moment, and that's just so entertaining to be a part of, even if at some point we recognize I'm not ever going to be Hunter Ace, and even if I quit my job and did Hearthstone full-time, I could get closer. But the kid is crazy talented, and just turned, 19 today? 20 today? Something like that? It just kind of blows my mind to think about. So, if you're listening, please keep playing Hearthstone. Please keep trying to get better. But if you don't end up being Hunter Ace, it's still okay. He's still good, and you can still be good, and that's all right.
Sounds like a good discussion. I think that's a good place to cap it off.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
I'm trying to look
So-
up. Hunter Ace was born. Hunter Ace turned 18 today.
Oh my god.
Oh my lord.
Man, you're not making me want to really push for prelims. This whole discussion has made me really not want to push for prelims this season. If I'm being perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't like the discussion of this, even though it's more honest, just because it prompts that feeling. But in reality, what I really love about Hearthstone is that it rewards that desire I have to be better than I was yesterday every single day, even though I know I'm not going to be on the pro scene. And there's still a lot of moments where you watch HCT and you can also see these top-level pros making mistakes. Really, really significant one. There was an HCT tournament earlier this year where Kranich tapped with a full hand. It's Kranich. Like, one of the top point earners ever, and he tapped with a full hand just to burn a card for no reason. It's, these sort of things happen because Hearthstone's a hard game, and there's so much going on, and it's mentally taxing at every single level. And it was really cool to kind of get this glimpse into how the high-level pros are even just talking about the memory aspect of the game when I'm still worried about, like, what's my game plan as Mally Druid against anything. For it to get that granular.
Finding lethal.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out the answer, like every answer, is just go face.
Thanks, bot.
Just go face is the answer. All right, we can keep talking about this for a while, but I think the most important question to ask...
How long can this go on?
It can go on for a while, but we're not going to let it. What we are going to do is we're going to thank some people. We want to give thanks to Stefan L for letting us use his cover. Check him out, his channel, linked in our show notes. You can give a big thanks to Hearthstone Top Decks and BeerBrick.com for Decklists, Hearthstone tournaments on YouTube for tournament VODs. Show notes in this week's episode, for this week's episodes are on CoinConcede.com, our website. You can support us at Patreon.com/CoinConcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.tv/CoinConcedepodcast. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. Right into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede. If you'd like some CC swag, head on over to shop.coinconcede.com for now. Our new shop has opened at Dad Legend. Just the one design for now, but more are coming. Big thanks to our producers, Viriatus, Arrow, and...
It's so fluffy!
As a reminder, the Badass Women of Hearthstone Tournament is still seeking our support. We have a link in the show notes. And it's time for some Coin Concedes. Who wants to go first? Botticus, you get to go first.
All right. I want to coin concede to SC2 Forever. Always been a great supporter of the show, great supporter of mine. He's a great dude, and I flarked up today. I totally forgot that we were recording on Tuesday, and I accidentally scheduled his coaching session for right before, basically where we weren't going to be able to do it. But as always, he's great, and we rescheduled right away, and he said it wasn't a huge issue, so I'm very thankful to him, and yeah, I'm looking forward to our coaching session later this week.
Sounds good. Nickolias, you know who you want to coin concede to?
First off, for you guys for letting me on again. I really appreciate it. And then also to the patrons who decided they wanted to get coached by me. It means a lot that you actually that you actually chose me for coaching. And I just want to say thank you so much. It means a lot that people want me to help them get better. So,
yay. Don't worry.
Yeah, I remember.
If you choose Nickolias as a coach, he will spend some time on your hand tracking.
Yeah, I remember the first time I was on the list to be able to be chosen as a coach, and people chose me. It's a feeling like nothing else. So yeah, you should definitely choose Nickolias if you didn't this month, because obviously he's performing exceptionally well. And if somebody's going to know the meta and how to play every matchup in it, I would expect Nickolias to be that person you want to choose.
Still go to Hat for the rogues, though.
Yeah.
Hey,
Or
I could do Rogue too. I feel like everybody forgets that Rogue is my favorite class.
Botticus.
Quest Rogue is good again. I'm definitely playing ladder this week. Except I might be too late. I'm worried. I'm scared that I missed the boat. I could have just been playing Quest Rogue this whole time.
Bot is definitely the Quest Rogue person to go to there. Will say, but the first time that people saw you versus me playing, I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah. Come on, Hat. You got to revive a Sherazan like 3 times or whatever. Crushed everybody else too.
I mean, get Arcane
I
Giant.
could have just queued my Pirate Warrior and just destroyed you, but I decided to play a Miracle Rogue Mirror.
Yeah, you had integrity, and look what that got you. Only
Yeah,
a coaching job and then a spot on the podcast. I guess that actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it worked out really well, actually.
Well, Micron Concedes got 3 of them. First, Deck Tech, he wrote a super cool, extensive article on the Death Rattle Rogue he hit Legend with. He's obviously a good friend of the show, very good at lawyering and arguing in general. We had a nice semantics argument yesterday, which prevented me from doing anything at work, which I appreciated then, and then I got to work today, it's like, oh, I got stuff to do. So, props to Deck Tech, and it's okay, my boss doesn't know, don't tell him. Props to Blizzlet. Unfortunately, Lord Grievous, his last episode is this week on Blizzlet, so I don't know if they're replacing him as a host, but I do know his farewell episode is coming this week. Go listen to them. Don't listen with the kids. That is not a family-friendly show. Extremely not family-friendly.
I'm extremely sad right now. I did not know this.
Oh, they tweeted it today, Botticus.
Well, I'm not on Twitter 24/7. I'm in Discord all the time now.
You're one of the 12 people in their Discord server. What's up?
They didn't put it in their Discord server, did they?
That's false.
Did I miss that?
You did.
I'm the worst.
It's fine. I don't think you're the worst.
Rip.
It's okay. But yes, we miss you, Lord Grievous, but thank you for all the laughs. And if you like conversation that is mostly about Hearthstone, sometimes not, go listen to Blizzlet. Do not let your kids listen to it. It is not family friendly. I want to make sure that's very clear. But it's fun. And shout out to the Into the Wild League, starring and run by one Nate Wolf, who is a good guy over at the Into the Wild podcast. He's running their league. It's the UHL format, and it's a lot of fun. There's a bunch of different luminaries and community personalities over there. I would definitely take the time to go check out their streams as they're streamed if you want a glimpse into Wild. And this is not just meta decks. There are definitely some fun ones being played, and Taylor Eve won her match today with, I believe, a N'Zoth Reno Priest was involved. So, yeah, it gets pretty interesting over there. So check them out. And also, shout out to SC2 Forever. I played this week on the ladder against someone named SC2 is dead, and I had to tweet at him, and he's like, you better win. It's like the only thing that was dead at the end of that game was not SC2. So, it was fun. And that's our show for the week. Nickolias, people were looking to find you. Where could they go?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Nickolias123. I'm also on the Coin Concede and Belen's Discord, and I'm also a coach on Gamer Sensei at gamersensei.com/sensei/Nickolias.
Great. What about you, Botticus?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at BotticusHS. I'll say my Twitch, but I don't know when the next time I'm going to stream is. Twitch.tv/Botticus. Hopefully it's sometime in the next couple weeks that I'll stream again. Maybe towards the end of the season if I'm going to push for a top 500. We'll see what happens.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter at RidiculousHat, on Twitch at twitch.tv/RidiculousHat. I'm definitely doing my Thursdays. My Mondays have been very inconsistent lately because, that's kind of how it is. I'm considering if I want to take a streaming hiatus from Mondays. I've I've learned, to the surprise of very few people, but maybe to myself, that I might have overburdened myself a little bit lately. So I'm going to, as the rest of my hosts Riley smile and nod, thanks guys, I am going to reevaluate what my calendar looks like and see if I can still pull off twice a week. I'd really like to, because I like that time, but I also like having time, so it's going to be a balance. But no matter what happens, you'll find me right here on CoinConcede, and you can join our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. It's the program that has rapidly, in the past year or two, become one of my most used programs on a daily basis, so check us out. A lot of good conversation, and that's our show. So keep calm and track on, and if you see us on the ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Take cold comfort in your victory. You win. I can rest now. You win. For now. Now, your victory proves nothing.
The day is yours.
I choose death. You have triumphed. This time, this hunt is yours.